Welcome to this overview of Sitra's Megatrends 2026 report. In this video, we'll dive deeper into what the current megatrends, that is global broad trajectories of change, mean from the Finnish perspective and what can and should be done now. We are currently living in a time of unrest, marked by uncertain prospects and overlapping crises. The tectonic plates of global politics are shifting. Environmental tipping points are approaching. Technological development is rapid, and population growth is starting to decline in many countries. In Finland, the economy has not grown, and the crisis in public finances is challenging both the funding and the service promise of the welfare state. It feels as though one disruption barely eases before the next is already knocking at the door. The current era of global turbulence and the major future forces of change underline the need to move from reactive responses to goal-oriented action, renewing society in a determined way so that it can withstand future change. So, how to do this? We need to understand where we are now and where we are going. What is possible now and what are the boundary conditions for change? We need to go further in our interpretation of what the changes mean and think about what is the future we are building with our everyday choices. This is where Sitra's Megatrends report helps. Let's start by looking at where we have come from and what has already changed. If we look at the global situation over a longer period, one could say that we have lived in a time of peace and prosperity in Europe. Globalization strengthened interdependence between countries, and economic growth and development were largely driven by the United States and Europe, resulting in global economic expansion. Now we are living in an era of unrest. There is war in Europe and protectionism is on the rise. Economic growth and development are increasingly led by BRICS countries, while growth in Europe has been slowing down. From Finland's perspective, one could say that after the end of Cold War, Finland remained non-aligned for a long time and was a stable, consensus-driven welfare state. However, Finland has also changed in the past years. Currently, we are a strongly allied country on NATO's front line. We have an aging population, low birth rate, and we are becoming an increasingly multicultural nation. Now, if we want to understand what the global megatrends, such as climate change and biodiversity loss and digitalization and AI, concentration of wealth or growing geopolitical tensions mean, we must interpret them from the perspective of this changed world. And if we want to understand what they mean for Finland, we must also look at them from Finland's perspective. We examine megatrends through 4 themes. The first theme is people and culture, where we are moving towards a society of longevity where elderly are the majority and youth is the minority. The birth rate in Finland has been extremely low for years and population growth has come from immigration. A major demographic shift is underway. The second theme is power and politics, where we see the transformation of the world order testing the strength of democracy. A new world order is taking shape. Authoritarianism has increased and democracies are being increasingly challenged. Finland must define its own place in this new world. In the third theme, nature and resources, the environmental crisis forces us to adapt and innovate. The effects of global warming and biodiversity loss are already here and impact lives both in Finland and worldwide. The central question is how to renew society so that it increases the vitality of nature rather than weakening it, as is currently the case. And fourth, in technology and the economy, we see how artificial intelligence is revolutionizing the foundation of society. Artificial intelligence can increase productivity and provide a competitive advantage. At the same time, it challenges research, education, and decision-making. The central question is, who has the power to define how we develop and implement AI? If we look at these changes together, it becomes clear that individual reforms are not enough. We need a new social contract, a shared promise for the future that will work in a changed world. Before we go into what the new social contract could be, let's dive a bit deeper into the four themes. We have looked at each theme in terms of boundary conditions, key changes, and opportunities. Let's start with the boundary conditions. Megatrends and the changes that have already materialized define what is possible now and in the future, and set limits within which the future should be built. The clearest boundary comes from nature. We only have one planet, and if we wish to secure livable conditions for future generations, we cannot make it uninhabitable. Yet this is what we are currently doing, as we have exceeded 7 of 9 planetary boundaries, and several tipping points are approaching. For Finland, this means accelerating the sustainability transition while at the same time adapting to extreme weather conditions and growing global uncertainty. Global uncertainty has already increased due to geopolitical tensions and conflicts. An essential boundary condition for Finland is our geography and political alignment. We share a long land border with Russia, and we are a member of the EU and the NATO Defence Alliance. This defines the geopolitical position and community in which we operate and build a more sustainable future. The availability of resources is an essential connected question. The sustainability transition and the adoption of new technologies require critical materials, infrastructure, and expertise. Currently, these leverage points are concentrated primarily in the United States and China. Finland and the EU must therefore find ways to operate within these boundaries, for example, by investing in the circular economy and increasing their own digital infrastructure. The building of a good future also requires people. Finland's population is aging, the birth rate is very low, and the population growth over the past decade has depended solely on immigration. At the same time, Finns live longer, in good health, and remain highly educated. Over the next 10 years, we must reform society to better accommodate long lifespans and to remain attractive to both those who already live here and those who might consider moving here. Keeping these boundary conditions in mind, what are the key changes and opportunities in each theme? Firstly, in an aging society, confidence in the future is being put to the test. This was evident, for example, in Sitra's latest Future Barometer. There has been a clear dip, especially among the youth, in the confidence in the future. This relates to growing uncertainty, a sense of intergenerational injustice, fear for the planet's livability, and mistrust of the pension system. It is also connected to the growing difference and tensions between regions, generations, and culture in Finnish society. To increase the belief in futures, we must have a future worth believing in. One part of this is creating the structures to support a long-lived and diverse society. Lifespans have been getting longer, and that is a tremendous achievement. At the same time, if a small, aging nation wants to survive, many things must change. We need an entirely new focus on lifelong learning, reform of working life, and health and social services. We can promote intergenerational fairness and view long lifespans and diversity as valuable resources. Secondly, we see that democracy is struggling on many fronts. Democracy faces challenges such as the erosion of trust, populist exercise of power across the political spectrum, low level of participation, and a chaotic information environment where the reliability of information cannot be ensured. There are many opportunities that we can take to renew democracy, but we must commit to it. The fundamental question is whether we want to defend democracy and update it so that it meets today's challenges. And if so, everyone must also be willing as individuals to take responsibility for renewing democracy and to demand the same from decision makers. We can adopt democratic innovations, for example, the broad-scale use of citizens' panels as part of decision-making, better use of existing democratic structures, and the construction of trusted information environments so that we continue to have reliable sources of information in the future. In the future, for instance, algorithmic transparency, new platforms, and methods for evaluating AI-generated information may have become commonplace. Thirdly, we see that tensions around the sustainability transition are growing. 10 years ago, it might have still been possible to envision a relatively stable path towards a more sustainable world. Now, planetary boundaries have already been significantly exceeded, the climate has warmed, and the condition of nature has deteriorated. Because of this, adaptation is needed alongside renewal. The green transition is under pressure from global populism, but on the other hand, investments are still directed at it. So even though we see resistance to the green transition in political rhetoric, it is still progressing. The environmental crisis is also increasingly intertwined with security policy. There are plenty of opportunities to adapt and renew. We can move forward with circular economy and focus on reinforcing natural capital. We can invest in nature-based health services. Leveraging the health benefits of nature could bring Finland hundreds of millions in savings. We can move towards a regenerative economy where we shift from seeing nature as a resource to increasing its vitality and understanding that humans are completely dependent on nature. And finally, a key change in technology and the economy is how artificial intelligence is reshaping institutions of knowledge. AI is reshaping the production, processing, and dissemination of knowledge, and it has a significant impact on the media environment, education, research, working life, and decision-making. At the same time, AI is only one element of accelerating technological development. Other disruptive technologies such as quantum technology and biotechnology are also important, as is the combination of different technologies, an area in which Finland has particular expertise. The key question is whether we can adopt artificial intelligence in a way that not only improves productivity, but also strengthens people's agency, democracy, and trust, while remaining within the limits of the planet's carrying capacity. The opportunities presented by artificial intelligence are huge, but realizing them requires responsible implementation. Megatrends draw attention to broad arcs of change and continuities. Yet, we live in a time of surprises in which individual events can trigger major global shifts. For example, large-scale geoengineering projects could alter local climates and natural cycles in significant and unpredictable ways. The outbreak of global conflict could upend the world order and completely change which futures are even possible. It is equally possible that something unexpectedly positive happens, opening up significant new possibilities. Global multilateral cooperation could be significantly strengthened in response to shocks and crises. Technological breakthroughs could dramatically improve access to energy. The exploration of wildcards helps us remember that while we can know and infer quite a lot about the future based on the present and the past, we cannot be certain about what will happen. This does not mean that we should stop striving for the best possible future. Quite the opposite. It means we must stay sensitive to the signals of change and remain open to surprising futures. As I mentioned, there are many individual opportunities. However, megatrends and the current time of unrest point to the need for a broader reform. In our view, Finland needs a new social contract, a rethinking of how power, responsibilities and rights are distributed in society. We must renew Finnish society so that it is better equipped to meet future challenges. We also need a new promise about the future, one that is credible and inspires action. A new social contract is ultimately about choices. Will we build a society that takes population decline and long lives seriously? Are we committed to strengthening and renewing democracy? Can we find ways to live in harmony with nature and enhance its vitality? Will we learn to use technology in general and AI in particular in ways that benefit people and societies? So, what building blocks could a new social contract consist of? Based on the interpretation of megatrends, we have identified the following. Renewing the welfare model. At the heart of the social contract lies the definition of what a welfare state looks like in Finland, where people live longer and population and tax base are significantly smaller. The welfare state can hardly mean simply adding more things to old structures. Instead, focus should be placed on how to successfully bring the basic ideas of the welfare state, such as equality, education, and high-quality basic security, into new circumstances and into a society with greater longevity. Creating a forward-looking model for immigration. Finland should develop a forward-thinking approach to managing immigration that takes into account both the needs of the economy and society, as well as people's concerns. There must be a genuine, thoughtful, and wide-ranging societal discussion on these topics. The current system does not sufficiently address the challenges of a changing labor market, demographic structure, and international competition. Fostering a vibrant democratic culture. In addition to strengthening the structures of democracy and implementing new democratic innovations, it is essential to reinforce the culture of democracy and, above all, the capacity for implementation. The vitality of democracy does not depend only on institutions or elections, but also on its ability to deliver tangible benefits to people. Democracy also demands more in today's world: activity, critical thinking, and a willingness to understand different perspectives. As the population ages, citizens' contributions are increasingly needed to strengthen and renew both local and national democracy. whether it concerns political parties, civic organizations, sports clubs, or other actors working for the common good. Enhancing the nature's vitality. Finland has committed to ambitious climate goals and strong environmental legislation, thus laying the foundation for a new social contract in relation to our environment. The direction is clear, but implementation still requires significant effort. A sustainable future also demands a deeper shift in thinking, moving from exploiting nature towards promoting well-being and reinforcing the vitality of nature. Promoting bold and sustainable use of technology. Finland's future growth will come from businesses that produce internationally desirable, valuable products and services. This creates jobs, strengthens the tax base, and boosts confidence in the future, especially among young people. Growth requires a strong willingness to invest, both within companies and throughout society. Ambition, concrete actions, and a willingness to allow creative destruction are needed. Therefore, both ownership and leadership must be bold and aim for global leadership. There is a lot to do, and we need to do it together. A new social contract can be built through broad participation and by turning tensions into creative solutions, just as Finland has done many times before in its history. It is worth remembering that the future is not predetermined, and even in these times of unrest, we are not at the mercy of megatrends. It is as important to remember that a better future won't come by itself. We need to build it, keeping in mind the boundary conditions, understanding key changes, and grasping the opportunities. Finland has every opportunity to succeed in its pursuit of a flourishing future if we truly commit to the effort. It is time to roll up our sleeves.